The human population. We are finally here to some very controversial topics. The human population size, affluence, resource consumption, they all are interrelated and they all impact the environment. Probably one of the best examples that most of my students know is China. China is striking with more than 1.3 billion people. That's almost 20% of all humans live in China. I had an uncle who once said, if hate were people, I better be China, because eventually one day they will outnumber us all. Because of China's rapidly growing economic development, it may one day be the world's largest economy. Things that used to be scarce, like automobiles and refrigerators, are now pretty much commonplace in China. And although the United States, here we have 315 million people, we've historically been the world's largest consumer of resources and, of course, the world's greatest polluter. But China is readily, very quickly surpassing the U.S. in both consumption and pollution. And it is already the largest emitter of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide. And it consumes 1/3 of commercial fish and seafood from the entire planet. So the Chinese are facing considerable environmental challenges as their influence and well-being have increased. Sustainability, managing the presence of our population where we live and of humans on Earth, requires addressing both population growth and resource consumption. China has already taken dramatic steps to limit its population growth for many decades. It's been this one-child policy where couples restrict themselves to a single child were rewarded financially, while those who had like 2 or 3 more children, they faced sanctions, and such as the 10% of a salary reduction. So essentially, they were taxed heavily for having more children. So Chinese officials have used numerous tools, and all of them controversial, especially to us Americans, to basically meet some population targets, even abortions to sterilization and, the designation of certain pregnancies they have said to be illegal, essentially. So China is one of only few countries where government-mandated population control measures have been implemented. So the government has stepped in and put in mandates for population control measures that contribute to reducing population growth. So after decades of having one of the world's most highest fertility rates, China's now fertility rate is 1.5 births per woman. So in addition to the one-child policy, the economic prosperity has also contributed to slowing population growth. If China's current population dynamics continue, its population will reach a maximum by 2030 and begin declining short thereafter. Population decline is only one part of the picture, however. Even if China's population were to completely stop growing like today, the country's resources and consumption would continue to increase as standards of living start to improve. So the greater number of Chinese people are purchasing cars, appliances, and material goods that were really only common in Western nations because now they only have one child, so they can afford it. So all of these products require resources and materials that once China did not need. And so manufacturing a refrigerator requires, mining the materials, processing raw materials like steel and copper, producing plastics from petroleum products, and using large quantities of electricity to manufacture such things. So having a refrigerator in the home increases your daily electric demand. I could go on and on. All of these processes generate carbon dioxide, which is air and water pollution and lots of other waste products that China has not had to deal with before. So here, the second picture from the left, you can see a typical Chinese street. And it's evidence of the size of the population that is there, but also the number of people. So between 1985 and 2002, China's population increased about 30%. All right, but the number of motor vehicles that China used grew by over 500%, from about 3 million vehicles to 20 million today. China has over 50 million private cars on the road, and by 2020, it'll total 140 million if it continues. So, according to the Chinese government and estimates, China is already the second largest consumer of petroleum on the planet. That's right underneath us. And the concentrations of urban air pollutants like carbon monoxide and photochemical smogs are on the rise. So in 2013, 7 out of the 10 most polluted cities in the world were in China. But, the news is not always bleak. China is already higher in fuel efficiency standards than we are, and they're quickly becoming a leader in manufacturing like new technologies that save our resources. And so this influence that China has on the environment is dramatically increasing influence because of, well, first of all, the size of the country and also its ability to sustain industrial activity. However, increasing industrial activity is occurring in many other parts of the world where humans are populous. So we have to find a balance between how much we produce and if it's, just because it's efficient doesn't always mean that it's good. But on a side of this, you have to look at what the country is doing in itself. There's pictures of propaganda about how wonderful a one-child family is and how they can prosper, with just one child. And of course, we have all heard the stories about leading to these adoption issues. It's very common now to see many families with an adopted Chinese child because they see these pictures like you see on the left here of all of these infants and babies that have just been abandoned, because their parents were going to lose 10% of their paycheck just for having them. And an already struggling family, that's just not very efficient. These laws did apply, however, to only this one ethnicity group in China, the Han's ethnicity group, which accounts somewhere between about 90-95% of all Chinese people. So, it's essentially across the board, but they did strict it to just this one ethnic group.